Mark 12, verse 30. You will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Okay? So he's saying that all of your being, your whole soul, your heart, your mind, everything, you will love God with the whole thing. Now there's a problem with this if your soul is vexed. There's a problem if your soul is damaged. There's a problem. Okay? Mark chapter 12, verse 33. He says, it is important that we love him with all our heart, with all our understanding, with all our soul, with all our strength. And it is important that we love our neighbor as ourselves. So you can't love God with a damaged soul in the way you ought to. And it's very difficult to love your neighbor if your soul is damaged. It's difficult to love yourself if your soul is damaged. It's difficult to have confidence in yourself. Your self-esteem is very low. That's some of my problem. I have a self-esteem problem. Because anybody that's in ministry with me on a different level, this was a very significant week. They had the heavies at Matthew Ashimaloa's meeting. Some of the biggest ministries in the world were there. And we thrown right in there. But I'm noticing, this is me, I'm very honest with you. When I'm standing there, it's not being humble, it's a self-esteem problem. I'm always standing back and letting them go and letting them speak and not saying a thing until somebody asks me my opinion. And so there are certain people in our lives that recognize that, the difference between humility and a low self-esteem. And a low self-esteem comes because the soul has been damaged and hurt in some place in your life. We're fixing to have an altar call in this service because we're going to help a lot of people here. And the thing is that humility, and I've seen people that have a low self-esteem, but they're very prideful. There's a difference. Okay? Now, let's read chapter number 8, verse 36 of Mark. Mark 8:36. For what shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul? What shall it profit if you gain the whole world, had all the money in the world, had all the blessing in the world, had all the cars you wanted, and you lose your soul? Because the soul is vexed. Verse 37, Mark 8:37. Or what shall a man give? What shall a man give in exchange for his soul? What can a man give in exchange for his soul? Let's go to Matthew chapter number 26 and verse 38. This is Jesus speaking. He said unto them, what did he say? My soul is exceeding sorrowful, beyond sorrowful. Mark chapter 14 verse 34 says the same thing. My soul is exceeding sorrowful unto death. Now, there is a sorrowful soul. There is a hurting soul. There is a broken soul. There is a split soul. Let me talk about the split soul. And then we're going to pray for a bunch of people. My mother-in-law is here somewhere. Mom, are you here? Yeah, Mom's here. The other day, Mom was going through, rummaging through her stuff and fixing the place. And she found a letter that Bernie, my sister, wrote to me in 1978. And I don't know how it got there. Probably, when I moved in and took over the family, amen. Hey, me and Chichi, amen. And I moved with my little Katundu there. Some of my stuff may have stayed there. And so Mom said to me, I found this, And so I read the letter Bernie wrote to me. And we were extremely close. And then we became unclose, and now we back close again. Because brothers and sisters always have this thing, So Bernie and I were very close for many years. They thought at some point we were twins. And I'll explain that story. But when I read the letter Bernie wrote to me, I started to cry and sob. This is about 3 months ago. And last night I was putting my stuff away, and here was the letter, and I read it again, and I was really touched inside. And because of some of the things that Bernie was listing there and asking for my advice and my input. And so just a little bit about my life. When I was 5 years old, I turned 5 on the 5th of January. 1957 was my birth date. So 62, 5th of January, I turned 5. My mom and dad were working. My dad was working on the railways. They were laying track in the middle of the bush in a place called Imbizi, going towards what is now other side Rutenga, going towards Triangle, because the sugar estates were opening. And they opened employment to colored people to earn more money, but they sent them to the bush where there was nothing. I mean, totally nothing. And so, school. So my parents took me as a little boy. I don't think they explained it to me. They may have. I don't remember. Took me as a little boy. I could barely bath myself. And left me at some old folks' home, Auntie Katie and Uncle Angel. Uncle Angel was my grandfather's older brother. Uncle Angel was the one that was convincing Noah to build the ark. He was so, he said, old folks. I'd never met them before. I didn't know who they were. And they had a horticultural business, spinach, carrots, that whole stuff, selling to the market. Uncle Angel worked at Matabele Steam something. There near Sowerstown. And so I was busy out there in the garden with a little boy, and Auntie Katie was washing carrots, and I saw my parents driving away. They had a blue Opel Kadett. They were driving away. It was like there by the front. And I started screaming, they're leaving me, they're leaving me, they're leaving me. And here was this old lady trying to console me. And, it's like, I don't even know this lady, and my parents are leaving me. And I stood there and cried, and I cried, and cried, and cried. I cried all night. I cried the next day. I cried the following day. Cried for a week. I went to school at Trenance Primary School. I cried all through for the first 2-3 weeks. I just cried every day. And Mrs. Alfreds kind of took a liking to me. She knew my parents, of course. Everybody knew my dad used to play in a band. Mrs. Alfreds was looking after me. I remember I used to sit on the veranda. The house that they lived in was half the size of this platform. It was a little lounge, with 2 little chairs, and I had a bed right there, a small kitchen, and Uncle Angel and Auntie Katie's bedroom. That's all it was. The toilet was outside, like somewhere over there in Tafara. And it's like, if you go to bed with something on you, you're going to keep that thing all night. There were all kinds of things. And snakes everywhere. Snakes everywhere. So I remember sitting on the verandas to look at the road, hoping my parents would come. And for many, many years from that point, I believed I was adopted. I really did. I was convinced that I'd done something wrong. And because I was adopted now, they were sending me back to my parents. And I remember sitting on the veranda, and I've told this story before, but for those that haven't heard this, a Beatles song used to come on. The Beatles were popular back then, and there was a song that used to come on, almost every now and then, Let's go, I want to hold your hand. And I used to cry. And I used to cry when I hear that song. And as the years went by, then my sister Bernie went to school the next year, but Bernie went to my mother's older sister. And they lived right in town. I was still living in the bush. And I was convinced that I was adopted because Bernie was living in a nice house in Barham Green. I was living in the bush with no electricity, with a little paraffin lamp. And I was convinced. And then to make matters worse, my parents took me to Mbakwe and just left us. And there again, I see them driving away, and Bernie's crying, Donovan was that tall. And in boarding school, you have to have somebody to fight for you. I couldn't fight. We were the first of the lineage of people going there, you know. And then they used to sing. I heard them saying, hey, 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 newcomer, cucumber. Hey, hey, hey. Newcomer, cucumber, hey, 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 hey. And then they put the food on the table, and we couldn't eat. I cried for days. And then I saw somebody hitting Donovan. One guy just hitting Donovan. I was small too. Bernie was always taller than me. I couldn't fight. Bernie used to hit all of us. She used to always be tall. She used to hit all of us. Come. I'm going somewhere. Just work with me. I was always a small guy and was sickly as a child. So when I got to standard 5, Sister Stella Mackey was our nun. I didn't do bad in class. I didn't do great. Stella Mackey said, you are too immature to go to Form 1. You have to remain another year in standard 5. Well, that was painful because Bernie was in standard 4. And Bernie all her life came first in class. And they were saying, eh, eh, eh. Your sister's coming. And I remember my dad went to make an appeal for me to go to Form 1. And the nun said, Mr. Bismark, your son is not eligible to go to Form 1. He's too immature. He's too small. He hasn't grasped some things. And I remember my dad walking out and cussing me out and saying, you stupid, useless, you're paying all this money. I was convinced I was adopted. I was convinced. And then comes Bernie. She's doing well in class. But that year, my life changed. That year, my life changed. I remember sitting on the bed with my mom in Mahalapi. And she said to me, pray for wisdom. Pray for Solomon's wisdom. And from that age, I started still today, every day, pray for wisdom. But what happened was, life goes on. Struggled with myself, struggled with my confidence, still sick, and then I started doing sports. The great doctor said, your son needs to do sports. Don't take him out of sports. I'm doing sports. And, I used to come 8th in the race and there's 8 people running, But I was there. One time I was swimming and I was doing a circle in the pool, backstroke. But I was there. The next time I dived into the pool and my swimming trunks came off, I was like, I was there. I joined the basketball team. I had no trainers. And so Ricky Fisher and I became very good friends. I love Ricky so much. He died a few years ago in a motorbike crash. But I was never one of the 5 starting. For a number of reasons, I wasn't good enough. But the other reason was I had no trainers. And so we had super pros those years. And so Ricky used to be subbed. And then I used to use Ricky's super pros. And he had bigger feet than me. So I was like, kaplop, kaplop, kaplop. Oh, man. So I had self-esteem problems. But I started working hard in school. And I began to say, I'm going to prove to this man, that's my father, I'm going to prove to him that there's something inside of me. So everything I did from that time was to please my father. I'm 52 years old and I still do it. Everything I do to please my father. It's heartbreaking. If I don't get my father's approval, it kills me. Everything I do, preaching this message, preaching anywhere, I'm doing it for approval. Doing it for approval. If somebody doesn't like me, if somebody looks at me weird, I hurt because of what happened to me when I was a child. I have to be loved. I have to be hugged. When I met Chichi in 1978, and when Chichi told me she loved me, for many, many years, I never believed her. Because I didn't think I could be loved. I didn't think I could be loved. I'll do anything in the world for Sheila Velakis, my mother-in-law, because she loved me and cared for me and took care of me in a very unique way. I'll do anything for my mother-in-law. Anything. Because she was accommodating. She helped me, helped build my self-esteem, took care of me in very unique ways. So years go by. I'm married. We have 4 things. Amen. We have 2 things at home now. Amen. I just preached at the Potter's house. There's no African that preached at the Potter's house up until that point. I was the first one to preach for Bishop Jakes. And all kinds of things happened. So hold on. So I'm really pumped, and so all kinds of things happen. TBN's opening up around the world. Stuff is opening up. I'm in Charisma magazine and so on. And things seem to be going well. But even that night when I preached for Bishop Jakes, and some of you can still watch it, The Blessing of 1,000 Times More, I didn't feel I did well. I went to the room depressed. I went back to my room depressed, sick, just felt bad. And almost every time I preach anywhere, no matter where I am, including last week in Matthew Ashimaloa's church and Joey Makondo in Zambia, and these great guys in Nigeria, I just go to bed feeling I didn't do well. It's not like I'm fishing for comments. It's because I'm for compliments. I have to prove a point. So I'm trying to buy something for Chichi, and I'm running through the mall, literally, in Houston. I'm running through the mall, trying to find something. And the song comes on, I Want to Hold Your Hand. I want to hold your hand. And in the middle of the mall, I got a flight to catch in 2 hours. In the middle of the mall, I break down and start crying. I start sobbing and crying, howling. I'm howling, I don't know why. And here's what happened. This is what happened. God showed me that the day my parents left me as a 5-year-old boy, way back then, a 5-year-old boy in me shut down. My soul split. And in me, I remained a 5-year-old in one area of my life that I didn't allow anybody into. And a song opened my soul. So I couldn't understand when Cheech and I would fight why I'd have these feelings. Because inside of me is a 5-year-old boy that never grew up. So when I got home, I got in a car. I drove to Bulawayo. I went to that spot where my mom left us. In Tronance. It's just a cement slab. And I remember standing on, when I stepped on that spot, I started crying like a baby. I was all by myself. And everything I felt when I was 5 years old came rushing back. Everything. My confusion. My bitterness. My anger against my father for doing that. I stood there as a 45-year-old man crying like a baby. I fell on the ground just crying. And I realized my problem was my soul was damaged. My soul was damaged. And there are men here, you beat your wives because your soul is damaged. Some of you can't progress in life because something happened to you when you were small. And inside of you is a child. There are some mother-in-laws. The reason you're hateful is not because you want to be. It's because of something inside of you that makes you the way you were. Your soul is split. Politicians that rule countries, the reason some of them are so vindictive, go back in their lives. Something happened when they were kids, and it split their soul. And the apostle said we must worship him with our whole soul. Our whole soul.